Even though interest rates are going down, a new report shows many people are drowning in debt.
Our economy is very strong.
Cracks are appearing in Canada's financial system as the housing market implodes and the overall economy implodes as well.
You okay?
No.
So let's get right into what's happening here. Comes from the Financial Post. Cracks are appearing around the edges of Canada's credit world. Delinquencies are rising at the nation's medium-sized banks. Though the Bank of Canada has reduced its rate to 2.25%, it still remains higher than it has been for the past 15 years outside of the pandemic. And that is a good thing to note there, because obviously you've got a lot of people saying rate cuts, this is going to spur activity in the economy, in the housing market. But how's that going to work when it hasn't been this high for 15 years? So that just shows you what's going on. So CIBC notes this: nor has the wave of mortgage renewals off the pandemic lows yet reached its peak. CIBC Capital Markets expects that in the second half of this year, the share of borrowers facing payment shocks of more than 40% will hit 5 to 6% of the mortgage portfolio, more than double the share in 2025. So the one question that we've all got to ask there is, can these people afford it? Can they afford a 40% payment hike on their largest expense?
No! God, please, no! No!
I mean, they've been kicking the can down the road constantly, but can they afford it? And of course, the answer to that question is fuck no. These people cannot even afford to put food on the table.
Increased levels of poverty and hunger are becoming normalized in this country.
Says this country's hunger crisis is worsening at an accelerated pace.
You've got people driving up who own multiple properties, going into food banks in Mercedes and taking food away because they just don't want to default on their properties. But guess what? When the mortgage renewals come in eventually, they're going to have to face that payment shock, and it's going to go right into the financial system. We're already seeing that begin with the amount of power sales that have absolutely exploded and is up a whopping 900% in the Toronto area, just to give you an example. And then I just want to show you this as well, because a lot of people would say, well, the Bank of Canada has cut rates to 2.25%. So rates are down now 275 basis points from 5%. But how much is the 5-year mortgage rate down? Because that's important. The Bank of Canada doesn't control. They can influence, but they do not control, like the 5-year bond, which is one of the components which goes into the 5-year fixed rate mortgage, which is the most popular in Canada. Although the popularity of a 1-year and a 2-year has soared, because guess what? People cannot afford the 5-year. It's just too much. So the 5-year is down, as you can see here, 1.71% or 171 basis points. So you've got the Bank of Canada's overnight rate that is down over 100 basis points more than the 5-year bond is down. And that just goes to show you what's going on here. The Bank of Canada can keep cutting, but as you can see, for the past 3 to 4 months, it's had zero effect pretty much on the 5-year. It might even start to actually tick upwards. You can see here, we went from 5% all the way down to 2.25%. So it's really based on inflation perception. And if they keep cutting rates and the markets perceive that inflation is going to go up, you're going to see those rates that are going to soar as well. The debt-based economy that Canada has is crumbling right now, because guess what? The low inflation rates of the past from 2008 all the way to 2020 are over. They are gone. You're seeing protectionism and deglobalization that are soaring in popularity right now, despite the fact that those will increase inflation and increase prices.
I think I want my money back.
So you've got this as well. The collapse of the housing market just does not relent here. You've got Shazzy Nightmare in Niagara. This is a 65% loss on a power of sale house here. You've just got to think, right? Obviously, people are losing homes to the banks, and this is becoming more and more of a common theme. And these banks, they want to get rid of them fast, so they'll sell them at a huge loss just to get rid of them. And a lot of people will say, well, we have recourse loans. And some states in the US, they had recourse loans like in the financial crisis, but that didn't make any difference. Places like Nevada, for example, which saw home prices absolutely collapse.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
And you're going to see that even though the banks can go after these people, the reality is they don't have the money. Obviously, if they're defaulting on their mortgage and then they're losing their home, do you think they're going to have the money? They're just going to end up declaring bankruptcy. And that's what you'll see more and more. And I believe next year, you're going to really see the bankruptcies that absolutely explode. You've already got debt consolidations and those type of things that have exploded in the past couple of years. But bankruptcies, they're coming, unfortunately. So you can see here, this was bought in 2021 for $580,000, probably as a tear down just for the land, but it just sold for $205,000, which is absolutely insane. And obviously, Niagara Falls was another center of the booming epicenter of the real estate market where people were leaving. Places like the GTA, they were going to Niagara Falls, St. Catharines, Hamilton, Kitchener-Waterloo, London, Ontario, all these different places.
Buyers, continue to reevaluate their living circumstances and are more likely to want to make a change in their, their current home.
And now all these places are tanking. They were going to all these suburbs and now they're all tanking. And then you've got this, Peterborough is wrecked. You've got this house that is here. So it was sold in 2022 for $731,000, right at the peak of the market, and it just sold for $499,000.
You okay?
No.
So that's over a 31% loss again. And then you've got Hamilton Horror here. And this is a 44% loss that happened. And you can basically see it was sold again 2022 February, $875,000. It just sold for $490,000. Again, you're looking at these suburb areas. Hamilton obviously is its own city, but it's these areas that kind of surround the GTA or are commutable to a certain extent, maybe 1 or 2 times a week to the GTA, that were booming, and now they're absolutely collapsing.
It'll be painful.
I mean, who wants to sit in traffic for 3 to 4 hours commuting to Toronto if they have to go back to the office? And then obviously we had the jobs report that came out over a week ago, and it was really interesting because some shocking statistics came out of that, which is that small business growth is collapsing. Meanwhile, the oligarch companies which have more than 500 employees, actually they're behind the job growth. So Canada's job growth is increasingly concentrated in large firms. Canadian firms added 292,000 jobs in 2025, with large firms posting a net gain of 592,000 jobs. That's not a typo. Small firms lost 300,000 jobs over the same period. The silent contraction of small businesses is likely going largely unnoticed, and BMO warns that ignoring it could be a costly mistake. Canadian policymakers are gambling on a structural shift. So you can see here, firms with less than 500 employees is the red line, and that's going down, and that's been going down now for over a year. Meanwhile, the firms with over 500 employees, that is going up, and that hasn't really stopped. And again, it's to do with the red tape, the regulation, and all the subsidies. That is why this happens. You put more red tape and regulation in the way of small businesses, more of them will fail. And that's exactly what is happening in Canada, much to the benefit of the oligarch companies. And it's no wonder why that is happening when you're seeing what's going on with those companies. So also with the October report, you saw full-time jobs that were down 18,500. Part-time jobs were up 85,100. So again, the report was distorted by a loss of a lot of full-time jobs and a massive gain of part-time jobs, which is never good. Obviously, the stability for people with part-time jobs is not as good as full-time jobs. And now I just want to show you this as well, because this poses huge risks to the financial system, is the rate of change of mortgage arrears. And with what we just discussed, with what CIBC is saying about 40% of these renewals upcoming, well, guess what? What's going to happen to this? Again, you've just got to ask that question. Can people afford it? I think we know the answer to that is no. And then you've got this. The government is so disconnected with average people that guess what? They think they're financially stable. This comes from Mark Nixon, and he put 25.5% can't afford groceries, 2.2 million rely on food banks, 50% are $200 away from insolvency. But this is what the government is saying. Take a listen to this.
Well, I think the colleagues and the country understood we needed to find savings. I think Canadians have been tightening their belt for quite some time, and if you want to be credible when you're saying you're going to make generational investments, you also have to have the discipline to look at how you can make government more efficient. What program can you streamline? How can you bring technology? How you can make sure that we deliver better services for Canadians? Those are tough decisions, but they are needed decisions. I think Canadian elected us with a strong mandate. The budget of today is an investment budget. You're going to see generational investments, ambitious in our investment, rigorous in our spending, and I think we're meeting the moment. Canadians have felt the world is changing. There's a lot of things going on. There's some headwinds, but Canada has a very strong fiscal position. We can make these investments at the time, being very rigorous in our spending.
So Canadians have been tightening their belt, but the government, they've been loosening it, loosening it big time.
Yeah, let's say that.
And this is the laughable thing. The government doesn't really care. They print their own cash via deficit spending anyway. Canada's rent report, most rents actually down, especially in Calgary, significantly down here, 7.5%. This is November 2025 as we've got so far. You can see that Halifax is up slightly, Winnipeg up slightly, Regina up slightly, but most of the major cities are actually down there. So obviously that plays into the housing market as well, because investors, they're not going to be rushing back, so it's always worth checking into that. And then Glencore said to consider shutting down Canada's largest copper plant. I mean, this is completely insane, guys, because if you look at copper over the past year, it's up 24%. If you look at copper over the past 5 years, it's up 61.57%. So why on earth would Glencore be shutting down a plant in Canada? Well, it's citing steep environmental upgrades and operational costs. And it's really those environmental upgrades. So, the politicians are coming out and they're saying we're making all these generational investments. We're going to build Canada. We're going to buy Canadian stuff. Well, how are you going to buy Canadian copper when the copper giant themselves is actually shutting down in your country? Because of your stupid regulations and red tape. I mean, this is just the clown country that you are living in when you see this kind of stuff.
It'll be painful.
And the industry has pegged their annual output at more than 300,000 tons. Most of that goes to the US, which is a net importer. A closure, according to these sources, would impact as many as 1,000 workers employed on the two sites. But you know what we can do, guys? We can just create more government jobs. You know what everyone wants? It's a government job. That's not going to impact inflation. That's not going to make the economy worse, is it? But, government is so inefficient that they just create more and more and more jobs. And then you've got Canadian shoppers spent 4% more on groceries in September than they did last year. Why did they do that? Well, because they wanted to. No, of course they didn't want to. And why is this happening? When you've got more dollars chasing less goods and services, that equals inflation. And you've definitely had that in Canada, and especially with the change in habits of all the elbows up clowns that are now buying Canadian and literally putting the price up and their own personal inflation rate, which is completely insane.
Elbows up. Elbows up.
And then you probably saw this a couple of weeks ago, which was basically when police actually drove over a suspect because they didn't put the car in park. What? I mean, this is just clown policing at its finest, to say the least. But I'm sure they're going to be chucking people in jail for writing X posts soon enough, exactly like the UK. And obviously, I can't play the clip because of the rules on YouTube here, but you've probably seen it anyway. And it's just absolutely insane. And then you've got Stephen Pumwazi here of Better Dwelling. Ontario taxpayers are paying to train the province's future. You're going to really laugh at this one. on. Taxpayers will work 1,300 hours to cover this amount, so really enjoy your work day tomorrow. You're helping. And then get into this. Strippers circulated and performed lap dances, including in the area beneath the building's historic dome. Access to private rooms was offered too at a fee of $400. And this is what the tax dollars are going for. Venue of $10 million Skills Development Fund recipient. Partners now licensed as an adult entertainment club. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. For decades, Starskovsky, oh man, I'm probably butchering that name, has leased the historic Exhibition Place building, which hosted progressive conservative fundraisers and the party's campaign manager's wedding in recent years. And guess what? It's now a strip club, and they got money donated to them by the government. So it's just absolutely insane. And then you probably all seen this happening, that conservatives are going across to the liberals. And you know, that just really didn't shock me, and it probably didn't shock a lot of you either, because basically the conservatives and the liberals, they try and act like they are polar opposites, but actually they're next door neighbors when you really think about it.
Yeah, let's say that.
And they'll prove that if they even get in the next election. The Conservatives will prove that. And I don't think they'll deliver on so many of the promises that they're making. And even things like censorship, I'm not even certain that they'll get behind that and stop it, because once you're in power and you can use that to your advantage, well, guess what? Usually what happens is they say, actually, I'm just going to silence the people I don't like. Free speech is becoming dead in the West, and you just have to see that trajectory to realize it. Eastern Canada now basically rules over the West. Nova Scotia MP crosses the line, giving the Liberals 170 seats, 49.5% of the votes. If Carney buys 2 more, there's no point in even holding Parliament. It's not like they answer questions anyway. Just his reign of terror for 4 years. Nova Scotia MP quits Conservative to join Mark Carney Liberals. I mean, it just goes to show what's going on. And then guess what? In the budget, obviously we covered this the other week, but I just find it so funny what was in there, which they are cutting taxes on.
Hey folks, in that 406-page budget that came out last night, the only mention of tax cuts for Canadians is for luxury yachts and airplanes.
So there you go. And that's for all Mark Carney's budget. I mean, this corruption, it just happens in broad daylight and people don't notice. And then this comes from a UK veteran here. My friend gave their lives for what? The sacrifice wasn't worth it. This country is so much worse than it was then. He's right. He is definitely right. As somebody who came from the UK, has lived most of their adult life in Canada, I can tell you that the UK is absolutely collapsing. And actually, you don't even need to take my word for it. If you actually go back and look at some of the remastered footage on YouTube of the UK during World War II, it looks a lot better than it does today, which is just absolutely insane. During a world war, the UK, the country, was a much better place. Less homelessness, less crime. It's absolutely insane what has happened to the country. So take a listen to this.
What does Remembrance Sunday mean for you? What is your message?
My message is, I can see in my mind's eye those rows and rows of white stones of all the hundreds of my friends and everybody else that gave their lives for what? The country of today. No, I'm sorry. The sacrifice wasn't worth the result that it is now.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
What do you mean by that, though, at this point?
What we fought for, and what we fought for was our freedom. We find that even now, downsight worse than what it was.
They fought for freedom and liberty, and you've got digital ID, you've got the Online Safety Act, you've got all these different things, and freedom is dead. And now they're even looking to ban VPNs in the UK. That's just how bad it's getting, and it's going to to come in the EU. It's also going to come in Canada, because these are globalist agendas that you can't avoid in the West, even in the United States. These things will come through. It's just the way they're sold to people just comes in different forms. And it's absolutely crazy to think about, because my great-great-great-granddad was actually killed in World War I, and he was killed by who? Not by the Germans. He was killed by the British. He was killed by a mortar that fell short. And so many people were killed in the same exact way. Meanwhile, the politicians and the elite people, did they fight in the wars? Absolutely not. I mean, one thing when you look throughout old history and kings and queens and stuff like that, they would often actually be in those battles and leading the army. Whereas now you see just all the cowards in back offices. They're nowhere near the front line and they don't want to get involved, yet they're happy to send their men and women to fight. And I think that's ultimately just absolutely disgusting. And that's why the real risk of war is escalating. And obviously Remembrance Day was last week, but still we have to remember, because escalating tensions everywhere could lead to the possibility of World War III, especially with these stupid leaders in charge who are disconnected from reality. And then Cat Canada put this: Carney was asked what would make investors choose Canada over the US. He implies that the US is a lawless Wild West, and that's why investors will prefer Canada. And that is more of just like a feeling bullshit instead of the actual economics of it all. Look at Glencore. Most of their exports is going to the United States. So where do you think they're going to set up shop? It's not just going to be because they think, oh, the United States is the Wild West, which is complete bullshit. Listen to this.
So when they think of Canada, it has to be easy for them to think about it. Okay, it's got the lowest tax rate for investment. I'm going to have regulatory clarity. There's lots of institutional, people know this, there's lots of institutional capital in Canada. And very strong banks, so I can get financed if I'm going to move forward. So I think those elements are there.
The U.S. is doing that too, though. So what is the extra thing that Canada?
Well, we have rule of law.
So, you know, Carney is saying that Canada has the rule of law like the United States doesn't have.
One of the nastiest countries to deal with is Canada.
I mean, I'm sure he'll be saying, oh, the rule of law is there if the Trump tariffs get overturned by the Supreme Court in the United States. The hypocrisy of these clowns is just unbelievable. And then another post from Mark Nixon here. Mark Carney plans on increasing the industrial carbon tax on steel to make them more competitive. Does he listen to himself speak? The US does not charge an industrial carbon tax. Liberals think taxing more makes us more competitive. This is next level dumb.
Well, there's a looming trade war with the United States and the industrial carbon tax in place. I'm wondering if in your plans to support Canadian industries, you would consider exempting companies from the industrial carbon tax, particularly like ones like Algoma Steel, which are actively working towards having greener technologies in place in the near future.
So what's happening is that there's a couple of things here. One is that there's a value to that industrial carbon tax and the predictability of that tax and the certainty around.
Then why is Glencore leaving? You know, their copper production, 300,000 tons, over 1,000 jobs that are going to go with that. Why are they leaving? They're citing environmental regulations. Basically, they would have to do all these massive renovations in order to get it up to Canada's standard to probably avoid this or to not pay as much for this industrial carbon tax. So it doesn't make economic sense. So they pull out. And that's what most companies will do. Mark Carney doesn't care because he'll profit if they go to the United States. It's just absolutely insane. And then government is corrupt posted this. Mark Carney says his budget will put $3,500 into the pockets of every working Canadian over the next 5 years. Great, because the average Canadian pays $15,000 a year in tax to the federal government. So over 5 years, they'll take $75,000 and return $3,500. What a brilliant economy. economists. But this absolutely sums up what they did with the carbon tax. You know, this sums up what even they're trying to do in the United States with this tariff dividend. It's exactly the same thing. We're going to take in all this money. We're going to give you a little bit back. So hopefully you vote for us next election. But the reality is all the inefficiency that goes on in between, people are getting rich off that. People are loving that. And that's what people aren't really digging into and they're not looking into. And if you believe the government, you are absolutely crazy. I mean, you've only got to check out my interview that might be published by the time of this video with Sam Cooper. It's absolutely fantastic speaking to him. But it's just mind-blowing what goes on, and his book is just a complete eye-opener. So Marty up north posts great stuff on X. Did Trump accidentally or intentionally ruin Canada? This is October 22nd, 2025. Take a listen to this.
All we did was differ with them economically, and Trump tried to turn them into a state. Yeah, I think that single-handedly ruined Canada.
And to be honest, you know, there's different angles to this as well, which I've been thinking about more. You could say that it was the election of a new leader, or you could say it was the 51st state rhetoric, because they both happened at the same time. So I guess we'll never really know. Obviously, the US Trump tariffs and everything that was going on then, and the threats that were being made to Canada played a massive role in the election. But did it determine the outcome? We'll never know. But obviously, that is what people are thinking. But the reality is, as I've said all along, these parties are two sides of the same street. They're neighbors. They're not that different. They're not on the other side of the country. They're not that different in their views. They are side by side, in my opinion. It's all about just portraying themselves to be the polar opposites. And that's what people don't realize. And it's the exact same shit in the United States. People just don't realize it. It's just a different facade. It's just different charisma that comes with each president.
I'm gonna come. Oh.
But it's the same shit that goes on in the United States. And then finally, you've got what is happening with citizenship is absolutely crazy, because all of this and the rules that have changed under Trudeau will play into these future elections. It's actually the Liberals that have been smart long-term in doing this in order to get more and more votes. And that's what's going to happen, especially if you see more and more anti-immigrant rhetoric, because guess what? There's so many immigrants in Canada right now. If they see conservatives are all anti-immigrant, that's going to drive them more towards the Liberals, and those are the exact votes that they need. But here's the thing. I think it's worthless arguing about the Liberals or the Conservatives. We need something new. We need to get away from the uniparty. Otherwise, nothing will ever change. You need something radical in order to change, and you need a massive shake-up of government. But the government's got too big in Canada. So can it even be actually made smaller when it's got as big as it's got? I'll let you be the judge of that. Let me know in the comments below. Please subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed this video. And if you want to help support my work, then please get the best VPN. It's the best gift that you can get this Christmas, because it's the best and fastest VPN. So thank you so much for joining me today, as always, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.